Developer Bloober Team has established itself as a horror specialist over the last decade, with Cronos: The New Dawn being its very latest summer effort. A gruesome, dark blend of Dead Space, the cryptic atmosphere of Alan Wake, and Geiger-esque creature designs. Now, Alex Battaglia has already covered Cronos in great detail on PC, but today it's time to check out the PlayStation and Xbox situation. Point number one before we get going: Cronos has no PS5 Pro support right now. The telltale sign is a lack of any mention of Pro enhancements on the PlayStation Store, which is a curious omission given Bloober's use of the console, with admittedly mixed results in Silent Hill 2 Remake only last year. Pro users still benefit, of course, by running Cronos on a more powerful system. It's the base PS5 code, essentially, with better performance, but there's nothing in the way of PSSR upscaler support or added visual features there. Point number two is that while the game is a refreshing change of theme after Bloober's work on Silent Hill 2, the technical fundamentals are rather similar here. It's Unreal Engine 5, as is pretty much everything these days, and we have a mode split between 60 FPS performance and 30 FPS quality on all consoles once more, with the exception of Series S, which only offers 30 FPS. To kick off with the comparisons, the mode toggle on PS5, PS5 Pro and Series X works in much the same way. Picking base PS5 to demonstrate, the key difference is a resolution boost on quality mode, while practically every other setting stays intact. Texture quality, shadows, ambient occlusion, and the quality of the game's software lumen is identical in matching shots through its derelict buildings and shelters. The one difference of note, however, is a drop in the volumetric setting on the 60 FPS performance mode, which lowers the resolution of those rays streaking through the fog. It's not a deal breaker visually speaking, and worth it in my view to attain 60 frames per second, but you might note more of a stair-stepping artifact on those rays of light. Otherwise, the benefit of running at 30 FPS on the quality mode really is in its improved image quality, with an often higher resolution image. Focusing on the resolution factor then, here's a three-way split between PS5, PS5 Pro and Series X. It's the 60 FPS performance mode in this case, where the difference in visual settings between all three is rather a moot point. Every setting between all three is matched, from textures to shadows and beyond, but this identical rendering load makes Cronos ideal for illustrating how each console uses dynamic resolution scaling to sustain 60 FPS. Test shot number one has us sliding through a gap in the wall here to get to this shop. Now I'll freeze frame here just as the bright edge of our gun is revealed, offering a perfect way to get a res count. The result being 1080p on Series X, a slightly lower 1026p reading on base PS5, and PS5 Pro coming in highest at 1242p. The ordering of figures here tracks with what we understand of each machine's relative strengths in GPU compute, and looking at PS5 Pro especially, we're getting a plus 46% increase in pixels pushed in this precise frame over the base PS5 model. This result is on the higher end of the DRS scale for each machine, so let's check out a more taxing moment. This cutscene, for example, just as our character salvages some equipment from a corpse, runs at sub 60 FPS on all machines. So logically, we're expecting to see the lower end of the DRS range on each machine here. In this case, that gets us to 864p on base PS5 and Series X, while the PS5 Pro, curiously enough, always seems to bottom out at 900p. For a more balanced in-between measurement, let's look at one last example. Right at the game's start, we're firing at this lock mechanism. We're freeze-framing just as the muzzle flash appears, reveals those raw edges again, before Unreal's TSR begins its upscale. That gives us, in this case, 1008p on Series X, 864p on base PS5, while PS5 Pro is once again in the lead at 1152p. The 30 FPS quality mode then boosts all pixel counts in the very same spots. For perspective, let's add Series S into the mix this time, since it's also got a 30 FPS target, making it broadly comparable in the overall experience. Inevitably, the early shooting tutorial with the locked door ahead runs with higher figures on quality mode, and we're hitting a flat 1440p on all consoles in this exact frame. That is with the exception of Series S, which instead tops out at 720p as a base image before the TSR upscale. Between the three premium machines, it's a sizable increase in pixels pushed then, especially base PS5 where we had a meager 864p reading in this specific moment at 60fps. To see a more taxing moment, meanwhile, on the quality mode, let's return to that cutscene as we pick up equipment. Again, Series S sticks at 720p just on this camera cut. Series X and PS5 are at 1080p, while PS5 Pro rockets ahead at 1296p. So if you can stomach 30fps play, you're getting a decent boost here on those three more powerful machines in this moment. Of course, the cutbacks on Series S run a little deeper than a drop to 720p. A few other settings take a hit where chiefly, to accommodate its smaller pool of RAM and lower memory bandwidth, texture quality is dropped. It's especially noticeable on close-ups of doors where you're expected to present a key. Not that texture quality is especially high on Series X to begin with. More generally, you'll also spot Series S producing blurry, soup-like textures around interiors covered in this alien sludge. It's almost like we're waiting for a high-res asset to pop in, and yet it never does. Likewise, dynamic shadows from the character generally holds up well to Series X, but the falloff in quality on Series S is much more apparent on shadows in the distance, leading to more flickering, pixelated shadows cast from your torchlight at range. Finally, volumetric fog quality also takes a visible nosedive on Series S. It's at an even lower setting than the performance mode on the other consoles, creating these visibly low resolution streaks of light from spotlights. The rest of the game is intact on Series S, but the drawbacks are pretty clear in terms of textures, shadows, volumetrics, plus the 720p 30fps target. Performance testing is up next, and the good news is that 30fps play on all machines is absolutely rock solid. At least based on the first 2 hours on PS5, PS5 Pro, Series X, and even Series S, for all its visual compromises, Bloober Team has optimized the game well for 30. Cutscenes are proven to be the biggest stress test based on the pixel count readings, and even there we're hitting an unfaltering 30fps line. This is the default mode on all machines where there's an option, and it's clear why Bloober presents this as the recommended pick. As for Series S, we'll never truly know how a 60fps performance mode might have turned out in this case. What we do have though is a flawless readout at 30, so there is a payoff in that respect for all the visual drawbacks put in place here. It's worth noting that I did get one sudden crash to the Xbox system menu on Series S, and I'd be curious to hear in the comments if anyone's experienced similar. Flipping over to the performance mode, PS5 Pro offers up the most convincing attempt at 60fps on console on first impression anyway. The game's opening cutscene is a real stress test for all three machines, though in truth it's not representative of how most actual gameplay runs. It works as a makeshift benchmark if we go with a three-way split here, with PS5 Pro offering as much as a 10 frames per second lead over the base PS5. So 45fps becomes 55fps, for example, with Series X typically slotting in between the two readings. Interestingly, Series X runs with a subtle adaptive screen tear, which you might spot at the top 10% of the display, while the PlayStation consoles are fully V-synced throughout. In actual gameplay, meanwhile, the results level out more consistently at 60fps, though there are problems. Base PS5 has the most egregious drops of the three. Anytime it's necessary to stamp on an enemy underfoot, incinerate walls, or even move between major areas, you'll often see a huge lurch into the 40s. Anything involving blood splatter effects or fire seems to throttle performance down on base PS5 this way, putting it well beneath the ideal VRR range on supporting displays. That being said, broadly speaking, it is a 60fps return on base PS5, just punctuated by moments where 40fps is very possible. The turnout for PS5 Pro is better than the base machine. Again, broadly, it's a 60fps experience with exceptions, though the dips are less notable in the same spots. Moving between areas in the subway, for example, still triggers drops on Pro, though they are at least minimized to a brief mid-50s lurch. It's an improvement here at least. Sadly, we're still going down into the 40s while incinerating blockades on Pro, so it's not entirely problem solved, but PS5 Pro does clean up some of the more standout drops from the base machine. Meanwhile, Xbox Series X also fares better than base PS5. You get dips into the mid-50s at lowest on Xbox, including moments where you need to torch walls, and so far, it's held its own at 60fps in most other areas. As it stands right now then, PS5 Pro and Series X offer a more playable 60fps experience, while there's some room to improve on base PS5. That's the state of play for Cronos: The New Dawn on console. If you did find this video useful or insightful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. Please do check out our Patreon to support Digital Foundry, and to get in touch with myself or the rest of the team, you know where to find us. But from me for now, thanks for watching.